The summer after high school, before I went to college, I decided I was going to become perfect. A perfect person who everyone liked, because the general consensus in high school was a bit strange, withdrawn. People looked at me and felt there's something a bit off about her. I tried to transform every area of my life that I could think of. I dyed my hair black for the first time. I decided I was now going to wear red lipstick every single day. And I decided I was going to learn to do winged eyeliner despite my pretty useless motor skills and lack of artistic talent. 12 years into doing it every day and we're still mostly lopsided. Don't look too closely. I changed my wardrobe. My mom kindly put some brightly colored jeans on the Topshop card. I'd always loved making videos and I'd done super well in a media coursework where I'd had to make a horror movie trailer. So that was it. I decided I was now going to be the horror filmmaker girl and make that my whole personality. I wasn't allowed to make films about anything else anymore. I was still allowed to be quirky as a creative person. I thought I could get away with being a bit weird, but it had to be the right sort of weird and I had to lose the awkwardness. I had to give off extroverted, self-assured weird. I actually stopped using my legal name and I literally made and handed out business cards. It was basically a personality rebrand that had a marketing campaign attached to it. It kind of makes me cringe to think about that now. I think because it was so calculated and inauthentic. But it worked. People believed me. People believed that I was this person I claimed to be. And there obviously was parts of me in there, but there was also a lot of performance. And I kind of wanted to scream at them, you know, like, why do you not see that this is not real? I'd go into toilet cubicles all the time just so I could catch my breath, have a little bit of a private spiral, maybe a bit of a cry, although I'd have to be careful about the winged liner. So yeah, you could say it worked. It worked until it stopped working though. Over the span of the 7 months that I spent at college, I became progressively more exhausted and mentally unwell. One morning, a friend turned up at my door to walk with me to the bus stop, as she did every day, and she found me crumpled on the floor in my pajamas, refusing to go with her. I think I shattered the illusion that I'd built for her in an instant. She probably thought, like, who the hell is this? And why does she have problems? And I couldn't have answered that question at the time because it would be almost another 10 years until I'd be diagnosed as autistic. I've spent the 10-ish years since I dropped out of college, because that's what I did a few weeks later, carefully limiting my social interactions, being just kind of terrified that that might happen to me again at some point. The exhaustion and the obsessiveness and the micromanagement of myself and how I was perceived that led me there. And it turns out what I had been doing is a thing. It has a name. It's been talked about since before I was born: autistic masking, using conscious or unconscious techniques which result in a less autistic behavioral presentation. Autistic masking is a concept that still confuses a lot of people. It really confused me in the beginning. I thought it sounded fake at first, like you can be autistic but pretend not to be. Surely if you were truly autistic, you wouldn't be able to mask. You wouldn't be able to hide it. But many truly autistic people can mask well. It's right there in the diagnostic criteria for autism, you know, not just silly YouTube videos like this one. The ICD-11 states, some individuals with autism spectrum disorder are capable of functioning adequately by making an exceptional effort to compensate for their symptoms during childhood, adolescence, or adulthood. It says autistic masking might be more common in autistic women, and that such sustained effort can have a harmful impact on mental health and well-being. And then the DSM-5 states that autism symptoms must be present in the early developmental period, but may not become fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacities or may be masked by learned strategies in later life. So masking is real, despite what fake disorder cringe has to say, and it actually can be measured by the Camouflaging Autistic Traits Questionnaire, which was developed in 2018 by Laura Hall et al. Interestingly, the CAT-Q breaks autistic masking, or camouflaging as it's sometimes called within autism research, into 3 subcategories. I'll share some more of my lived experience as I go through, and also some examples from other autistic people, mostly from another paper by Laura Hall et al, which was published in 2017. It was called Putting on My Best Normal: Social Camouflaging in Adults with Autism Spectrum Conditions, in which they studied the masking behavior of almost 100 autistic adults. And you can see if you relate. Remember that autism is a spectrum condition. We are all so different. So even if you don't relate to a single bit of my lived experience in any of the videos on my channel, that does not mean that you're not autistic. Also, not all autistic people mask. This is kind of a list of signs of autistic masking, not a list of signs of autism. And people can can also mask other conditions such as ADHD. I have that too, but I don't know if the CAT-Q would measure masking in somebody who just has a diagnosis of ADHD. And also please note that I am not a medical professional. I don't know if the ginger dead jumper and the gingerbread earrings gave that away, but just in case they didn't. The first subcategory of autistic masking / camouflaging is compensation. So these are strategies that you consciously adopt to compensate for, to make up for the fact that socializing does not come naturally to you. Some autistic people may feel the need to actively teach themselves how to socialize. So you may do this by analyzing people in your real life. Maybe you consciously copy their body language, their tone, their facial expression, maybe little phrases that they say. Just thinking a lot about what makes certain people likable and socially successful. You may actively study social skills, so you might watch YouTube videos about how to socialize. You may practice your facial expressions and your body language, maybe while looking in the mirror. And as well as people in your real life, you may also try to emulate characters from TV shows or movies or other media. The Embrace Autism website has an article about something called movie talk. Movie talk is mimicking a character from a movie or series, or possibly even from a book, as a way to present oneself as socially appropriate. This can range from repeating specific phrases from your favorite media in a social setting to attempting to completely become a certain character. Maybe this explains why so many autistic people seem to love cosplay, and why a lot of autistic people seem to be quite comfortable with acting and performance in general. As I say, you don't have to relate to all of these. I personally don't think I've ever used fictional media to learn how to socialize, at least as far as I can remember, and not consciously. Another big part of compensation that comes up again and again is creating social rules for yourself. I think this can help autistic people to feel more in control of an unpredictable social situation, which is, basically any social situation. So for example, you might think to yourself, whenever I meet somebody new, I must shake their hands and look them in the eye for, I don't know, a certain amount of seconds, maybe 3 seconds. Is that a normal amount of seconds to make eye contact with somebody? I don't know. I kind of want to look it up now. You see, if you find yourself Googling things like, what is a normal length of time to make eye contact with somebody, I may have some news for you. They conclude that on average, it is 3 seconds long, and no one preferred gazes that lasted longer than 9 seconds. I said 3 seconds off the top of my head. See, I know how to neurotypical. I saw one autistic person say online that they have a rule for themselves that if they're greeted by somebody with something like, hey, how are you? They don't actually answer the question. They'll just, answer with a similar question or return the question. Because people often do say things like this as more of a greeting, they don't always actually want any information from you about how you're feeling or what's going on in your current life situation. And I think this particular person has kind of learned that the hard way. I'm definitely guilty of often actually answering the question and sometimes oversharing, but that's my journey. I always appreciate it when I meet another oversharer in the wild. I'm like, I see you. There was one rule that came up quite a lot in the Laura Hull research, and this is also something that I adopted that changed my ability to socialize forever. I feel like I'm giving masking tips in this video. This video was not supposed to be masking tips, but around my late teens, I finally realized I could just ask other people questions. I don't know why that didn't occur to me before for so many years. Well, I do know why, but it also helped me from a social anxiety perspective to some extent to realize that people really don't care about me. Like most people I'm talking about would prefer to be talking about themselves anyway. So I would think about all of the things that they probably care about a lot more than me and analyzing whether I'm coming across as super socially appropriate. And I'd just ask them questions about those things that they cared about more than me. And I'd just be a great listener. And it was liberating. I speak in past tense because after working from home for so many years, my social skills are quite rusty. I often just go blank when it comes to thinking of questions to ask people, unfortunately. But for people who do struggle with thinking of things on the spot, I think sometimes autistic people, we can have kind of slower reaction times, and we need a bit more time maybe to process things that are kind of being thrown at you in a social situation. So it can be super helpful to script interactions to some extent. Some people I think go much further with this than I ever did, but I usually will write down questions. If I know I'm going to be socializing with a particular person, I'll write down questions and think about questions that I could ask them beforehand. And I have genuinely found that really helpful, and also that helps to reduce anxiety because I feel a little bit more in control of the situation. This 20-year-old autistic person in the Laura Hull 2017 paper said, I usually think up stories and how conversations might go before I have them, so I have responses practiced as well as potential things to say if the conversation dries up, in quotation marks. And yeah, questions can be great for if the conversation dries up. Again, this is feeling like masking school. How to mask with Meg, the new channel rebrand. That's not going to happen. And like, yes, masking does sometimes have a place and can be useful. There's a reason why we have adopted some of these strategies. It can feel necessary for survival. The second subcategory of autistic masking is masking. So in this context, masking specifically describes things that you do to cover up your autistic traits, covering up your natural way of being, like you're wearing a mask. For example, if you look at my home video, there's a lot of footage of me flapping my hands, particularly between the ages of 2 and 4 years old. You'll see I'm doing it almost constantly. After this age, I only see this occasionally. Is that because I stopped stimming like this? Well, no, not really. I still stim like this as soon as I'm alone. Basically, I will immediately revert back to doing this because it's what feels most natural to me. It's like my factory setting. I go back to my default state if I'm alone, even if it's just a few seconds. But you stop seeing it so much on my home video because I stopped stimming like this in situations where I was likely to be filmed. So like family gathering or performances at school. When my cousins were around and we'd choreograph a dance routine and my mom was filming it occasionally, you can see me flapping my hands on the sly. You can see me between the ages of around 7 and 9 stimming in ways that are kind of more socially acceptable. So I do a lot of skipping and jumping, bouncy movements that look kind of like normal child or slightly hyperactive child behavior. As a teenager, I can see it developed into a lot of kind of what I'm doing now, talking with my hands. Sometimes that gets very, very close to flapping my hands, and also maybe kind of subtly rocking back and forth as I speak. This is a result of the fact that my hand flapping started to be noticed by other children at school. And it's also just very noticeable that everyone around you is not, rocking back and forth and doing funny head movements and bouncing around all the time, which is a shame. It's a real shame. Imagine if I lived in a world where everybody was. Damn it. Now I want that. But yeah, I felt ashamed and I actively made myself stop. I even felt embarrassed and ashamed to do it in front of my mom, who always saw it as cute and creative and never tried to make me feel bad for it or anything like that. I still would get embarrassed to the point of being slightly annoyed with her if she kind of caught me stimming. But some autistic people will replace their natural stims with things that do look kind of more like neurotypical stimming, because everybody does stim to some extent. So they may stim with props instead of moving their own body, so doing things like tapping or clicking a pen or even just doodling. This person shared, I prevent myself from doing any particularly visible or otherwise noticeable stims. I still find myself doing things like shaking my leg repeatedly without noticing, but don't make any noises people would think are weird. Don't fully body shake like with the leg, but all of me, or do any finger movements or tapping, etc. That would annoy people. And I think masking often does come down to just trying not to be annoying. I think autistic people often have this urge to apologize for everything that we do and feel ashamed of a lot of what we will do naturally. When I was watching the most recent season of Love on the Spectrum, which I made a video about, one of the biggest things that I noticed was how often the autistic people feel the need to apologize for themselves. Another sign of autistic masking is worrying about how people are perceiving you during or after a social interaction. I think a lot of people with social anxiety do experience this as well, but I'm never quite sure how I've come across in a social interaction, and this can be pretty distressing. I usually assume the worst and I'll beat myself up about it for days and days to come, and that's a very exhausting process and can obviously make socializing seem less appealing. And masking can look like trying to appear relaxed in social situations despite all the stuff that's going on in your head, monitoring your body to make sure that you don't look too awkward or nervous. 94% of autistic people do experience anxiety. Almost half of all autistic people have severe anxiety. And understandably, a lot of autistic people experience social anxiety. When I did a poll on my community post, I think most people responded that they do experience social anxiety. And for some reason, anxiety and looking anxious is not really socially acceptable when you think about that. It's a bit strange, really. Like, what's so scary about someone else feeling scared about a situation? I don't know. It feels like something that you have to try and cover up, that you can't be honest about. Like, I had to go and hide in a toilet cubicle to cry because I couldn't show that emotion in front of other people. And when I did ultimately show my distress in front of a friend, you know, that friendship didn't last very long after that point because, like, my weird was showing. Unfortunately, I also think anxiety can sometimes be misread as hostility. Maybe you can come across as super serious, aloof, perhaps even uptight or stuck up. Another autistic person said, "My autistic lack of nonverbal signals are read as hostility, arrogance, or indifference by people. So I have to act the goodwill that I genuinely feel." So you might find yourself thinking, do I look natural? Do my hands look relaxed by my side? No? Okay, maybe to the front, or does that look too closed off? Maybe I need to put my hands behind me. You may have an inner monologue like that, monitoring everything that you do with your facial expression and body language, and you may actively edit your behavior as a result of that monologue. I find that this tends to be louder the more uncomfortable I am in a social situation. You may also find that you need to actively make yourself look interested. Some autistic people naturally have a very flat affect, might not be super expressive. My mom used to tell me, she'd watch me go into school and she'd be like, "You need to smile more." I think she thought if I smiled more, then everyone would want to be my friend. But unfortunately, I think by that point, people had already made their minds up about me. One smile was not going to be enough. I made a video recently about some parents of autistic children who have uploaded TikToks kind of discussing how their child being autistic and maybe not being super interested in their gifts means they don't get, you know, the magical Christmas moment that they were imagining. But Christmas is an example of a time where a lot of autistic people feel pressure to perform. For example, when opening a gift, it may take an autistic person more time to process that gift, to think about where is this item going to fit into my life. But people expect an immediate kind of like over the top grateful reaction, and that can feel like a lot of pressure, and some autistic people maybe get into trouble as children for not reacting in the correct way, maybe being a bit too honest about how they feel about a gift, or just having a flat affect and therefore not looking excited about a gift even if they are genuinely excited. So autistic people may learn that on Christmas morning or Christmas Eve, whenever you open your presents, they must put on an act and look super enthusiastic. There was one comment that I read, I don't know if I'll be able to find it again, in which the person was saying they kind of trained themselves to say, whenever they opened a gift, this was exactly what I wanted every single time, because they felt this pressure to look thrilled. And that is a form of masking. Autistic people may also mask their natural eye movements. Personally, I concentrate best when staring at a stationary object. When I look at somebody's face, I get a lot of information from that, you know, like there's a lot of movement going on. It's distracting. I can't maybe listen to them properly. I can't think of what I want to say next. If you want to have the best conversation with me, I'm better like staring off at something in the distance blankly. But obviously I know that eye contact is seen as respectful in Western culture. I was shouted at by a teacher in high school because my eye contact was appalling. I kind of have it ingrained as a rule that you need to try and look at people. Until today, I didn't know for how many seconds I was supposed to do that, apparently. 3. I'm not going to be bothered to count that, I'm sorry. If that's what I need to do to perform well socially, it's not going to happen. I do try and make a conscious effort to make eye contact. I'm not sure how good it is. I think my eyes do dart around quite a bit when speaking to people, and I wonder how that comes across. I think sometimes that can come across to non-autistic people as kind of a bit shifty or dishonest, not trustworthy, or maybe like a bit bored or disinterested, you know, if you're just staring off to something in the distance. Autistic people may also mask their autistic traits by simply not speaking, trying not to take part in conversations, sharing as little about themselves as they can get away with, not talking about our interests, because often we can be intensely passionate about our interests, and this intensity can be a bit confusing to non-autistic people, and maybe at times read as a bit odd, particularly if you maybe have more of an obscure, less socially acceptable interests. I say as little about myself as possible, as the more I say, the more likely it is that I say something inappropriate or give too much information about myself, which can then be used against me. The third subcategory is assimilation. This is the one that probably describes me in college the best, all of that calculated effort that I put in, as I described in the intro. Assimilation is the process of becoming similar to or becoming a part of something. So you're not only trying to mask or cover up your autistic traits, but you're going a step further. You're adding in more behaviors to make yourself seem next level, neurotypical basically. In my experience, this is the category of masking that takes the most energy and puts you at the highest risk of autistic burnout, which is something that I have a whole video about. I definitely recommend that you watch it if you're autistic, suspect that you could be autistic, or you have autistic family members. I think it's something that's very important to be aware of. And autistic burnout is the reason why I was crumpled on the floor in my pajamas and had to drop out of education at 17. So assimilation can involve playing a character. Like I was playing the character of filmmaker Meg, but you may have this sense that you just can't assimilate as yourself. The real you just feels like it's unacceptable. For me, it was like I've been doing whatever it is that comes naturally to me in social situations for my entire life so far, and it clearly has not worked. So I need to do something completely different. This autistic person in the study seemed to have a very similar experience to me, except they switched roles for different people in their life, which sounds potentially even more exhausting. I camouflage by putting on a character. I treat my clothes rather like costumes, and certain items of clothing help me to uphold certain personality characteristics of which character I am on that occasion. I have a repertoire of roles for cafe work, bar work, university, various groups of friends, etc. They are all me at the core, but they are edited versions of me designed to not stand out for the wrong, in quotation marks, reasons. And I think that was true for me as well. It was me at the core, but it was like I selected which of my traits to kind of enhance and which ones to leave behind. But you can see how this playing a character, this rejection and burying of your true self, how it could lead to a crisis of identity. Sometimes when I have to do a lot of camouflaging in a high stress environment, I feel as though I've lost track of who I really am and that my actual self is floating somewhere above me like a balloon. I also worry that this could be the reason why so many autistic people seem to be misdiagnosed with borderline personality disorder or emotionally unstable personality disorder. One of the traits of BPD is identity disturbance, markedly and persistently unstable self-image or sense of self. And then this is a quote about autistic masking. Camouflaging by ASC individuals has been reported as extremely effortful and challenging to one's identity. And I also feel like autistic meltdowns could be misinterpreted as BPD traits. And to make it potentially even more confusing for diagnosticians, autistic meltdowns are not mentioned in the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for autism. Nothing that's overtly about meltdowns on the autism diagnostic criteria, but then on the BPD diagnostic criteria, you have difficulties controlling anger and emotional instability mentioned. And I know for me that masking all day definitely led me to more autistic meltdowns because it was so cognitively taxing. Hopefully as time goes on, clinicians will become more aware of this crossover though. For me, I suppose masking did get a bit easier and parts of it have definitely become somewhat intuitive over time. I mean, I'm at the point now where I cannot physically unmask in front of most people. It is deeply ingrained at this point, but the assimilation part of masking, this becoming a character, that has never really become second nature. That always requires some amount of conscious effort. You can't just become neurotypical. Who would have thought it? But the thing is, maybe if you're convincing enough, people might believe, they might treat you as though you've become neurotypical, or you may just never be diagnosed as autistic, maybe be misdiagnosed with something else. Masking can bring you social success. It can maybe lead to better job prospects. There can definitely be some pros to being an autistic person who can mask successfully, but it also means you'll probably get no help. People will assume that you're fine, you'll look, in quotation marks, fine, you won't look like the masking is, potentially making you mentally ill. And masking can sometimes get you into situations that are beyond your capacity. All of the people I made friends with at college were genuinely so lovely, but sadly, I've grown apart from all of them, except my husband. He was the one neurotypical that I managed to catch and actually keep hold of. It was all worth it. But yeah, many relationships, for example, the friend who came to pick me up to walk with me to the bus stop. They've been added to the friendship graveyard, which is sad. I miss her sometimes. Taylor Swift's Red album came out around the time that I went to college, and we'd share headphones and listen to the songs together. And I remember this one time walking around a supermarket and ironically singing the song Stay, Stay, Stay to each other. And I felt for a moment like we were in a musical or something. We had a lot of fun together, and she put so much effort into that friendship, and I obviously did as well, but after a certain point I couldn't sustain it anymore. I think it really hurt her feelings that I kind of withdrew. Yeah, I do have a bit of a history of doing that, of putting in effort and then being unable to keep it up, and it makes me sad because there were a lot of lovely people who I've kind of left behind by doing that. And as I get older, I realize that some people may have really, taken that personally. Another way that you can assimilate is actually by avoiding social situations entirely. So this is me again in college, going to hide in toilet cubicles, running away to the library as well, in order to minimize the risk of being judged negatively and standing out in a negative way. You may also find that you rely on other people in order to socialize, maybe to sort of do some of the work for you, or perhaps make you look a little bit more sociable by association. You have the stamp of approval from one person, you must be doing all right. I don't know why, but I always feel called to make some sort of masking content at this time of year. It seems like a bit of a channel tradition. I guess at Christmas time, there are just a lot more social expectations on us. You may need to go to big family gatherings. You may be seeing friends and family members who you don't see all that often. You may even, gasps, have to go to some sort of work Christmas do. If any of this is the case for you and you find it exhausting, sending you love. I hope that you are able to find a few moments where you can read a few chapters of a book, or I don't know, play some games on your phone, give yourself little breaks in order to rest, even if you have to run away and hide in the toilet. It would be great if we didn't have to do that, but I think it's valid sometimes. I really want to make an effort to talk more about masking next year, specifically unmasking. I do have quite a few videos like this one and videos about the dangers of masking, and it's like, okay, Meg, but like now what? What are we supposed to do about that? And I'm kind of going on that journey myself as well. Maybe we can make some progress on that front together next year. It's difficult because how do we protect ourselves in this world where masking can feel like it's so necessary, and sometimes it literally is essential, for survival, but at the same time it can be so devastating to your mental health. It's a really difficult position that a lot of autistic people who do have this ability to mask are put in. Like, you feel a bit like you can't win either way. If you like this content and you like the sound of the things that I'm planning to make in 2025, then you are more than welcome to support me over on Patreon. Do not feel pressured to, but you can access 18, I think at this point, exclusive videos. You can also join the Discord server so you can chat to other autistic people or otherwise neurodivergent people who think they might be autistic. You don't have to be autistic to get in, just have to be a nice person. And then on the higher Patreon tiers, you can access a podcast. I also have outtakes. I think I've uploaded like 73, 74 outtakes clips at this point. Like, usually say if I do a memes, I'll post a few extra memes that didn't make the cut for the main video. If you relate to the description of autistic masking here and you're wondering if you could be autistic, as I say, these are signs of masking, not necessarily autistic traits, so you might want to go and have a look at the diagnostic criteria for autism. I'll leave the DSM-5 and the ICD-11 diagnostic criteria linked in the description. I would also really recommend looking into the theory of monotropism. Monotropism.org is a great website. I also have a video about monotropism, which I still think might be my favorite video of all time on the channel. I just love the theory of monotropism. Also something I want to talk more about next year. I absolutely love it. When I heard about that, I felt like my whole life was just explained. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video, which will be the last video of the year, very, very soon.